Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going deep on Canada.
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 Sounds fun.
We've got some really interesting sources lined up for this one. We've got Wikipedia, of course.
Of course.
We've got some Reddit threads, which are always entertaining.
Always.
And to add a little bit of an academic perspective, we've got a piece from the American Historical Association.
Oh, interesting.
So we're coming at this from all angles. But just to get started, when you think of Canada, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, man. Probably just like vast wilderness and, friendly people.
Yeah.
Maple syrup, hockey.
Hockey, for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny, though, because, you think of Canada as this, Great White North kind of place. But did you know that most Canadians actually live further south than Seattle?
Really?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that is pretty wild. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all those stereotypes about, igloos and polar bears, not exactly accurate for the majority of the population.
Right.
So let's dive into some of these sources and see what we can uncover about Canada, starting with their origins and identity.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so I was browsing Reddit the other day, and I stumbled across this thread about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Oh, wow.
I know it sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But there were actually some pretty interesting arguments being made.
Really? Like, what were people saying?
Well, some folks were, focusing on the economic benefits like closer trade ties and access to the U.S. market.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But then others were more concerned about, losing their Canadian identity and becoming, just another part of the U.S.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's a really fascinating debate, and it kind of highlights this close relationship, but also this tension between the two countries.
Absolutely. They share this massive border and have so much history and culture in common. But at the same time, Canada has really worked hard to forge its own distinct identity.
Exactly. And speaking of identity, did you know that the name Canada itself might come from the Huron-Iroquois word Kanata, which means village or settlement?
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple word, but it has this deep history, and it reflects the indigenous roots of the land long before European colonization.
Right, and of course colonization is a huge part of Canada's story. A complex and often painful chapter that we need to acknowledge.
Absolutely. The impact of European colonization on the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples is profound, and it continues to shape Canada today.
Yeah, their history, their culture, their ongoing struggles for recognition, it's all essential to understanding Canada's present and future.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about identity and history. Now let's move on to something a little bit more well-structured, government.
Government, yeah.
I was reading this article from the American Historical Association, and they were talking about how Canada's government is both a parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy. Can you break that down for us a little bit? Because I think that's confusing for a lot of people, especially those of us who are used to a presidential system.
Yeah, it definitely is a unique system. So basically, Canada has a prime minister who leaves the elected government.
Okay.
But they also have a monarch currently, King Charles III, who's the head of state, but plays a largely ceremonial role.
Wait, so the same King Charles as England?
The very same.
Wow.
It's a kind of a historical quirk.
Yeah.
He's actually the monarch of 14 other countries besides the UK and Canada.
Wow. Talk about a busy guy.
I know, right?
All right. So we've got this complex history, this unique system of government. But what about the people who actually call this vast land home?
Yeah, the people.
So I was looking at the 2021 Canadian census, and get this, over 450 different ethnic origins were reported.
450.
450. It's incredible.
Wow, that is a lot.
That's a testament to Canada's multiculturalism, right?
Absolutely. They're like a mosaic of cultures from all over the world.
Right. And I think the top 10 were Canadian, English, Irish, Scottish, French, German, Chinese, Italian, Indian, and Ukrainian.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
It really is a melting pot, and each of those cultures contributes to the Canadian tapestry.
It's not just a statistic either.
Right.
It's woven into the fabric of their society. You see it in their arts, their cuisine, their neighborhoods, their approach to social policies.
Yeah, you can really feel that diversity when you visit different parts of the country.
Absolutely.
And with so many different backgrounds comes a fascinating mix of languages, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Obviously, we know about the official bilingualism, English and French.
Right.
But did you know Languages like Mandarin, Punjabi, and Cantonese are spoken by a significant and growing portion of the population.
That's really cool. I mean, it makes sense with such a diverse population.
Yeah, and it really speaks to Canada's commitment to inclusivity.
Yeah, they've really enshrined multiculturalism in their policies, and they're trying to create a society where everyone feels welcome and respected,
Yeah.
regardless of their background.
Okay, so we've explored the human side of Canada, but what about the land itself?
The land.
I mean, we all know Canada is huge, EE.
It's massive.
It's the second largest country in the world by total area.
Second only to Russia, right?
That's right.
Wow.
But it's not just about size, it's about the incredible diversity of landscapes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You've got everything from the towering peaks of the Rocky Mountains in the west to the vast boreal forests stretching across the country. And then, of course, the icy expanse of the Arctic in the north.
Right, and each of those regions has its own unique climate, too.
Yeah, you go from like coastal British Columbia, which is known for its mild, rainy winters, to the prairie provinces, which experience a harsh continental climate.
Yeah, it's crazy how much the temperature can vary across the country.
It is. And those extremes, they play a huge role in shaping not only the lives of Canadians, but also the country's economy and their resource management strategies.
Absolutely. It's a constant balancing act between harnessing those natural resources that drive the economy and protecting the fragile ecosystems that are vulnerable to climate change.
Right. And speaking of the economy, Canada consistently ranks high in economic freedom, competitiveness, and low corruption.
Yeah, they've got a pretty solid track record there.
And it's not just about natural resources either. Canada has a thriving technology sector. They've made some groundbreaking contributions to science and technology over the years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it. They gave the world insulin, the polio vaccine, even the Canadarm for space exploration.
That's right.
It's pretty impressive, especially considering their relatively small population.
Yeah, they've definitely punched above their weight on the global stage.
For sure.
Which brings us to something that I think is really deeply ingrained in Canadian identity, healthcare.
Healthcare.
We all know about Medicare, their publicly funded system, but it's more than just healthcare, right?
Yeah, it's seen as a fundamental value, reflecting this deep commitment to social justice and ensuring everyone has access to essential medical care.
And it's a stark contrast to the system we have here in the United States.
For sure.
Which often sparks a lot of debate about the different approaches to healthcare.
Right.
But for many Canadians, it's a point of pride and a symbol of their values.
It speaks to their sense of collective responsibility and their belief in a social safety net that supports all citizens.
Yeah, it's a key part of understanding what makes Canada, well, Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting, as we've been digging into all these different aspects of Canada.
Yeah.
One thing that keeps coming up for me is this tension between unity and regionalism.
I see what you mean. I guess I've always thought of Canada as this unified, harmonious country.
Yeah, they have that reputation, right?
Yeah, so how does regionalism play into that?
Well, think about it. Canada is vast, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You've got all these distinct regions, each shaped by unique histories and cultural influences,
Right.
even economic priorities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And sometimes those differences create friction even within a nation known for being so peaceable.
Right, earlier we were talking about the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
And how that history, continues to shape their relationship with the Canadian government. That feels like a very specific example of those regional dynamics.
Absolutely. The Indigenous experience is central to understanding Canadian regionalism.
Yeah.
But it's not the only example. I mean, think about Quebec.
Oh, yeah.
With its strong French-Canadian identity and history of advocating for greater autonomy.
Right.
Or the western provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan,
Uh-huh.
whose economies rely so heavily on natural resources.
Right.
And sometimes they feel like their interests are at odds with the federal government's priorities.
So you have these, economic and political tensions simmering beneath the surface.
Yeah.
How does Canada manage to hold it all together?
Well, that's a good question.
Is it just their reputation for politeness?
Well, politeness might help a little bit, but it's more complex than that.
Okay.
Part of the answer lies in their political system, which allows for a degree of provincial autonomy.
I see.
Provinces have jurisdiction over things like healthcare, education, natural resources,
Uh-huh.
so they can tailor policies to their specific needs.
So it's like a delicate balancing act.
Exactly.
Trying to maintain a sense of national unity while also acknowledging and respecting those regional differences.
Yeah, it's not always smooth sailing.
Right.
These tensions can flare up in federal-provincial negotiations, debates over resource development, sometimes even lead to the rise of regional political parties.
So no nation is perfectly homogenous.
Right.
It makes you wonder how this internal dynamic plays out on the world stage.
That's a great point, and it actually segues nicely into something we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
Canada's role in global affairs.
I was thinking about that earlier when we were discussing Canada's contributions to science and technology.
Yeah.
Those achievements definitely put them on the map. But what about their political influence?
It's interesting.
I wouldn't necessarily think of them as a major military power, for example.
Yeah, you're right. They don't project power in the same way as some other nations.
Right.
But they've carved out this unique and influential role for themselves,
Okay.
particularly in areas like peacekeeping and international diplomacy.
I do remember reading about their involvement in World War II
Oh, yeah.
and their role in liberating the Netherlands.
Uh-huh.
That must have had a lasting impact on their international reputation.
Absolutely. And that commitment to international engagement has continued in the decades since.
Really?
Canada has participated in countless UN peacekeeping missions from Bosnia to Somalia to Afghanistan.
Wow.
They've also been active in organizations like NATO and the Commonwealth, building alliances and promoting peaceful resolutions to conflict.
It seems like Canadians take a certain pride in their country's commitment to peace and diplomacy.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of that.
It's a different approach to global leadership,
It is.
one that emphasizes cooperation and collaboration over military might.
Yeah, it's often referred to as soft power.
Oh,
It's about building trust and credibility through diplomacy, aid, and cultural exchange.
So they're using their international platform to promote the values that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
Inclusivity, fairness, peaceful coexistence.
precisely. And it's
Yeah.
earned them a reputation as a reliable and responsible member of the international community.
It's fascinating to consider how a nation's history shapes their foreign policy.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like Canada's own experiences navigating their relationship with a powerful neighbor and striving for internal unity have informed their approach to the world at large.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. It's a reminder that domestic and foreign policy are often intertwined.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From Canada's vast and diverse geography to their complex political system and their unique role on the world stage. But what about the everyday lives of Canadians?
Yeah. What about the people?
What defines their culture? What do they value?
Well, as we discussed earlier, multiculturalism is woven into the very fabric of Canadian society.
Right.
It's not just about demographics. It's about embracing and celebrating different perspectives and ways of life.
Okay.
And you see it reflected in their arts and literature, their cuisine,
Right.
the vibrant tapestry of festivals and celebrations that take place across the country.
I can just imagine, bustling street festivals showcasing food from around the world,
Oh, yeah.
Indigenous art and music being celebrated alongside European traditions.
You got it.
That's awesome.
And beyond this outward expression of diversity, there's a deeper set of values that seems to resonate with many Canadians.
Okay, like what?
Values like tolerance, inclusivity,
Yeah.
a strong sense of community, and a commitment to fairness.
It feels like those values are reflected in their social programs.
Yeah.
Their emphasis on universal health care and even their approach to environmental protection. It's like they're striving to create a society where everyone has a fair chance and feels a sense of belonging.
You've hit the nail on the head. Canadians often strike me as pragmatic and community-minded, focused on building a society that works for everyone.
It's interesting to contrast that with the more individualistic ethos often associated with the United States.
Yeah, it's a different approach for sure.
Which, speaking of it, brings us to that ever-present elephant in the room,
Ooh.
the relationship between Canada and the U.S.
Ah, yes, the complex dynamics between these two North American neighbors.
Right.
They're close partners,
Uh-huh.
sharing a long border and deeply intertwined economies.
Right.
But there's also a sense of rivalry,
Yeah.
a need to assert their independence and differentiate themselves from the giant next door.
It's that push and pull between closeness and independence that we keep seeing,
Yeah.
both internally within Canada and in their relationship with the world.
It's a constant negotiation,
Sure.
a balancing act, but ultimately it's what makes Canada such a fascinating and dynamic country to study. As we've been talking about Canadian culture and values.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about something we haven't really touched on yet, their sense of humor.
Oh, their humor.
Yep.
What's the Canadian take on comedy?
It's a great question, and I think it reveals a lot about the Canadian psyche.
Okay.
Canadian humor is often characterized by self-deprecation, irony, and this subtle wit that sometimes goes under the radar.
I've heard people say that Canadians are masters of the deadpan delivery.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They can deliver a joke with such a straight face.
Yeah.
You're left wondering if they were being serious or not.
Right.
It's all about the subtle nuances, the unexpected twist, and a certain dryness that's hard to describe but instantly recognizable.
And they're not afraid to poke fun at themselves, right?
No, not at all.
Like their stereotypes, their politicians, even their national quirks.
Exactly. It's a sign of a healthy society, I'd say.
Yeah.
Being able to laugh at yourself, especially your perceived flaws, shows a certain level of self-awareness
Uh-huh.
and a willingness to not take things too seriously.
Right. It reminds me of that pragmatic approach we talked about earlier. They just have this knack for finding humor in the everyday, even when faced with challenges.
Canadian comedy, like their culture as a whole, draws influences from a variety of sources.
Oh, yeah.
There's a blend of British wit, American absurdity,
Okay.
and a distinctly Canadian sensibility that's hard to define but definitely present.
So if I wanted to get a taste of this unique brand of humor, where should I start?
Well, you've got the iconic figures like John Candy, Jim Carrey, Mike Myers,
Yeah.
who all brought their Canadian comedic sensibilities to Hollywood
Right.
and achieved international success.
It's funny you mentioned those names, and I instantly pictured some of their most famous characters.
Yeah.
It seems like Canadian comedians have a real knack for creating memorable and often outlandish personas.
It's true, and there's a whole new generation of Canadian comedians making waves, too.
Oh, like who?
Like Samantha Bee, Seth Rogen, Catherine O'Hara.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
It's interesting how many Canadian comedians seem to find success in the U.S.
Yeah, it really is.
I think there's something about their humor that translates well across borders.
Maybe it's that universal appeal of self-deprecation and gentle ribbing.
Could be.
Or maybe it's their ability to find the funny side of everyday life, something that resonates with audiences, regardless of their background.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, I'm definitely adding Explore Canadian Comedy to my to-do list after this deep dive.
Uh-huh. Good idea.
It sounds like the perfect way to lighten the mood and appreciate a different cultural perspective.
I completely agree. Laughter is a universal language,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful way to connect with different cultures and appreciate the diversity of human experience.
As we wrap up our Canadian adventure, I'm left with this sense of admiration for this vast and complex country.
Yeah, me too.
We've learned about their history, their geography, their political system, their cultural values,
It's been quite a journey.
and we've only just scratched the surface.
That's the thing about learning, isn't it?
right.
There's always more to discover.
It certainly is. And I think this deep dive has given us a great foundation for understanding Canada,
Yeah.
but also for appreciating the complexities of any nation and its people.
Well said. So, to our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring. Keep digging deeper into the topics that intrigue you.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of knowledge and fascinating discoveries waiting out there.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Canada.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.